This is Boston Lanka News, bringing you news, views and entertainment from Boston and USA. I'm Vayoni Dimel. UNP MP Dr. Harsha de Silva, an economist turned politician, has been a strong voice in the Sri Lanka Parliament, voicing his opposition to the economic policies of the government. Dr. de Silva completed his PhD in economics at the University of Missouri in USA and has participated as an Eisenhower Fellow at the prestigious MIT in USA for an executive program on evaluating social programs. He has worked as the chief economist and treasurer for the DFCC Bank and thereafter co-founded the Nielsen Company before entering the politics. Dr. de Silva is here with us. Dr. de Silva, you gave a very powerful speech in Parliament in October 2013. You spoke with so much passion about the COPE report. Tell briefly, what are the most fundamental revelations that you found in that COPE report?
Actually, it's just not one, it's a series of things, something that is underlying everything that is happening. And that is, there is so much corruption, so much waste across the board. And if you pick up that, 500 page document, page after page, what you see is, accounts not being kept. There is no evidence for audit, that monies have been spent without appropriate procedure, multiple issues of people's money being misappropriated. So that is what we see across the board. So that is why I said at one point, it's like cops and robbers, going after people who are there just to rob. So that was the theme that ran across that report.
In your speech, you mentioned about Indian Minister Lalu Prasad Yadav, who was sent to prison for corruption in India, and wonder whether this will ever happen in Sri Lanka. You think there are current ministers in Sri Lanka who deserves to be in a prison?
Well, there are several of them who's been quote-unquote investigated. There is one person against whom there is a huge allegation of something like, 45 million of 150 million found in his vault, but never prosecuted. There are a number of others. There is a particular deputy minister against whom not one, many people have complained against having taken bribes. There are a number of instances, but nothing is moving forward. They just make a complaint at either the bribery and corruption, the commission to investigate. But it doesn't move beyond that. But in the case of the former Chief Justice or others who are not politically aligned to the powers that be, swift action is taken and, removed from office and even, prosecuted in High Court. So that's why I said, if you're with me, there's nothing to worry about. But if you are not with me, then we will go on you. That is the current situation.
Now, how efficient is the bribery commission in Sri Lanka?
It is inefficient. It has no teeth. It hardly has funds to even deploy policemen to follow up these matters. And also, it is not independent. The whole objective of the 17th Amendment to the Constitution was to create independent bodies that would, look into these issues without wearing, colored shades. But what has happened is that these have become completely biased towards the government that its relevance has been lost. I mean, the Indian example is good in that sense. Lalu Prasad Yadav, a powerful man, being prosecuted and thrown in jail, whereas it doesn't happen here. So that's the difference. And I was saying, for instance, where you're domiciled, simple case of corruption can be exposed first in the media and then, action taken against them. A number of cases that we read in the papers, but it doesn't happen here.
Writing an article to a Forbes magazine in USA last month, a central bank governor Ajit Kabral says that from a business perspective, the Commonwealth leaders while in Sri Lanka would learn that many global investors have found Sri Lanka to be a safe and credible investment destination. Your response?
Yes, I read that interview article rather, which goes to show the partiality of someone who's supposed to be impartial. That's the first thing that I got from reading that article. It's as if a government minister wrote that. But coming to the question is, I continue to ask, where are these so-called investors? The Commonwealth Business Forum was a fiasco with the casino king, James Packer, taking center stage, whereas the people who the government said were coming, the Tatas, the Birlas, the big Indians, who were going to set up manufacturing plants in Sri Lanka and so on, didn't show up at all. If you really look at the kind of investor who is in Sri Lanka, you will very clearly see that they are somehow aligned with the regime, and they come through somebody very powerful. But other than that, investors who come to Sri Lanka because it is a good investment potential, which is, which they can exploit, we hardly see. For instance, who are the investors who've come to the Hambantota port? It's been there now for 2 years plus. What industries have been set up around it? Nothing. What about the Mattala airport? What industries have come around that? Nothing. What are the industries that have been set up? I'm sorry to say this, but nothing. Sure, we got some hotels. We got Shangri-La. Sure, we got ITC hotel coming in. But that has no politics. Tourism, even if JVP is in office, would thrive in this country. So the government can't take great pride in saying, look, we brought in investors to build hotels. That's not something that they can take credit for.
You are a very harsh critic of James Packer's casino project, but I'm sure you believe in market economy, and during J.R. Jayawardena's time, country was open to the open economy. Given all that, why you are so against casino?
There are two things there. One is putting these casinos smack right center of the city of Colombo. Whether that will be the best place for the casinos to come. So there is a lot of opposition that these casinos are not in some far off place. I mean, if you look at the US, the history of casinos, the casinos was put in the desert of Vegas, in Nevada, not in Los Angeles, right? If you look at China mainland has got no casinos. They put the casinos in Macau, a little island of about, a few 100,000 people as opposed to 1 billion people in China. If you look at Singapore put it in Sentosa Island and the Marina Bay Sands outside of Singapore, Singapore being just even a city-state. If you look at Malaysia, they put it in Genting Island, right? So nowhere, unless it is a place like Manila, or Macau. You know, Australia and other countries, I don't, I'm not taking for comparison here. Is they put it away from where people gather, where there is daily activity. That is one. So whether the location is right, whether they should not put it in an island of Kalpiti or whether they should not put it in an island of Hambantota. But the more important issue is why do countries love casinos to operate in their countries? Why do governments do that? Is because there is a huge potential revenue that can be gotten from casinos. In Macau, which is the casino capital of the world, which brings in last year, or rather this year, expected amount is over 40 billion US dollars, as opposed to about 7 billion in Las Vegas and about another 7 billion in Singapore. The tax in Macau is 40% of the gross gaming revenue. In Singapore, it is 22% plus 17% income tax. In the Philippines, it is another 27% plus 30% income tax. In every country, they tax them at a very high rate. But in Sri Lanka, it is tax-free. I mean, it's an oxymoron, a tax-free casino. How can you have tax-free casinos? It just does not make sense. So they are being given a 10-year complete tax holiday on their income and another 12 years of income tax of only 6%. And they are saying, look, we'll put a 5% tax on gaming revenue, which is nonsense, which is absurd. And also to bring the 5% tax on gross gaming revenue, they remove, and I repeat, they removed 12% VAT on revenue and 2% NBT on revenue. So they remove 14% and put in 5% on the gross gaming revenue and reduce the casino tax currently of 40%, as that is the law in Sri Lanka, bring it down from 40 to 0. So obviously, it just is not for the best interest of the people of Sri Lanka, only for the shareholders whom we don't know exactly who they are.
Let's talk about the Chogam we had last month. In your view, what's the economic and political benefits Sri Lanka received by having the summit in Colombo?
I think the government got into a fairly complicated mess, to be honest with you. With the business forum was dominated by the Packer story, right? That the investors actually were missing. You know, the only real investor that had come was Packer to set up this casino, and the rest of it, this filling of the sea by Golface and all, are Chinese projects, and they have been discussing that for some time, and China is not Commonwealth, so that has no connection, right? So this 1.2 billion investments they're talking about has nothing to do with the Commonwealth. That is one. The next 2 days, the center stage was Mr. Cameron, right? David Cameron coming to Sri Lanka, telling Mahinda Rajapaksa and his government, look, unless you do this, we will hold you to some international tribunal. So we spent all this money, right? They say somewhere between 12 to 14 billion rupees to bring the global attention to Sri Lanka, where the issue was the human rights record of Sri Lanka and nothing to do with any Commonwealth charter or anything to do with the Commonwealth. I don't think the summit brought in a net positive result. Sure, there may have been some positive results, but the negatives, I think, outweighed the positives, which ended up being a net negative for Sri Lanka.
Let me ask my last question, Dr. De Silva, about your party, UNP. People blame UNP for not doing its share as a strong opposition and not positioning itself as an alternative to the government. Where's your party going?
That is not an easy question to answer. Being in the opposition is not easy, particularly when you have a juggernaut of a government that has purchased two-thirds majority, that can change the law as and when they feel, and a government that can go to the extent of removing the chief justice in a process that lasted for less than 24 hours in Parliament. You're dealing with a government that has completely muzzled the press. Right? You're dealing with a government that has no respect or regard for the true word of democracy. You're dealing with a government that uses its military might to either scare people or get rid of them completely. So in that environment, it is difficult for us as opposition to perform to our potential, I think. But having said that, I agree that there is a lot of disappointment in people about the opposition. What we need is for the entire opposition to unite. This is not a time to try to create a name for person A or person B. This is a time for us to work together as the opposition. So we are trying our best. The UNP recently created a leadership council because there was so much of bad press and talk that the leader of the opposition or leader of the UNP must change. So in fact, what happens now is that the leadership council led by Honorable Harsha Surya has obtained all the powers that was with the leader from the working committee, whether it is the appointment of organizers, whether it is the giving nomination for people to contest election, whether it is the policy formulation of the party, everything. And I'm telling you, as a person who is fully knowledgeable about this matter, has been transferred from the leader to the leadership council. So Ranil Wickremesinghe becomes the senior leader and the leader of the opposition, and he is tasked with dealing with other opposition groups to create a common opposition and also to lead the party's activities in Parliament. The Leadership Council now takes center stage and bring unity within the party and come out to the people as one powerful opposition party.
That concludes our news edition. We meet you again with another news edition of News, Views and Entertainment from Boston and USA. Till then, goodbye.